and I'm getting ready to start a live here. And of course, this is this day in Black baseball history, and we're talking about October 14th, 2025 edition. And we're going to go back and talk about some historic things that happened on October 14th, through the years, through the ages. And I think we're going to start tonight with 1906 and probably finish up with a 1954 something. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for joining. In case you've never followed me before, my name is Phil S. Dixon. I'm a baseball historian with over 45 years of experience, and I give a this day in Black baseball history, and then I give a commentary, which comes from my many years as a baseball historian. So we get a chance to talk about a lot, and that's what we're going to do this evening. We're going to talk about baseball like you just don't normally get baseball. So we're a minute in, so I'm going to go ahead and start. I got a lot of things on the agenda. I might even leave out a few tonight. I have so many. But let's go to October 14th, 1906. Let's jump right in there. Second baseman Dave Wyatt started a triple play to end the game in the ninth to give the Leland Giants a 5-0 win over the Chicago Union Giants at Chicago's Auburn Park. Walter Ball struck out 5 and tossed an 8-hitter for the shutout victory. Wow, lots I can talk about here. Dave Wyatt. Dave Wyatt is the guy really became a great sports writer, and he was the one who gave us so much information about Andrew Ruth Foster. So when I wrote my book, A Harvest on Freedom's Fields, that kind of chronicled Andrew Foster's career, I used a lot of Dave Wyatt's information. They were together in Texas when I think Dave played for Hot Springs, Arkansas, the Arlingtons, and Ruth Foster was playing for the Waco Yellow Jackets. And then, of course, Dave Wyatt came on to Chicago first and was playing with the Chicago Union Giants, and that was Peters and Frank Leland's team at that particular time. And he was trying to get Ruth Foster, get them to, pay to bring Ruth Foster because he knew he was a great pitcher down in the South, but he couldn't get anyone to believe in these Southern players because sometimes the Southern guys would just take the money and then they would never show up. So he ended up paying Ruth Foster's fare himself, and Ruth came to Chicago, ended up joining the Chicago Union Giants, and so the rest is history. But Dave Wyatt was all a part of that, and some of his articles that he writes in the 1920s are priceless, because his knowledge of the game was just tremendous. And so I always like to talk about Dave Wyatt. It doesn't get talked about, and most of the people I'm talking about night after night don't get a lot of publicity, but it's my honor to be able to talk about them here. So anyway, Walter Ball, another great pitcher. If you follow Walter Ball, here he is in 1906 tossing the shutout, and he becomes the first pitcher to pitch in a game with the new Negro National League in 1920 when he was with the Chicago Giants and they played the Indianapolis ABCs, which was the inaugural game of the new league, and Walter Ball was there. And so I like to talk about him always. He passed away in Chicago, buried in Burr Oak Cemetery there, and several of the American Giants and Chicago Giants, Union Giants players, all buried in Burr Oak Cemetery in Chicago. Been there many times over the years. Emmett Till is also buried there, and you probably know about him from the whole civil rights struggle. So it's a very historic park. Ruth Foster and Frank Leland, they're over in Lincoln Cemetery, so they're not in Burr Oak, but Walter Ball is definitely in Burr Oak Cemetery. All right, let's jump across to October 14, 1911. Ruth Foster's American Giants defeated Frank Leland's Chicago Giants by a 7-6 score at Chicago's Gunther Park. And Ruth Foster's team racked up 18 hits and then turned 3 double plays to defeat Cyclone Joe Williams to gain the victory. Man, I tell you what, Joe Williams, he's in the Hall of Fame, Cooperstown, New York. I talk about him often, especially in the fall here. He's in a lot of exhibition games. He was one of those guys that if you knew you were going to be playing a big league team, this is a guy you're going to attract over there. to do pitching for you because he's going to bring his A game. So, but this happened in this game that he didn't bring his A game, and he ended up giving up 18 hits. That's a lot of hits, and he ended up suffering a defeat. And the Chicago Giants ended up being Frank Leland's new team that he organized in 1910. So they were they were on their second year, and so anyway. That's history there. Rube Foster got the best of Smokey Joe Williams, and I'm not sure who pitched for Foster's team that day, but yeah, they really handed him the works. All right, so let's go to October 14th, 1916, and this is a game. So we're going to kind of leave Chicago and jump over to Kansas City, but we still got the American Giants. So lefty Rolla Maple. Tossing them up for Smelzers, All Nations, lost a 3-1 game. Come from behind, it was a come behind victory for Andrew Rube Foster's Chicago American Giants in Kansas City. Of course, we know the All Nations team was J.L. Wilkinson's team. Of course, they also had some pretty good guys in 1916. Jose Mendez was on that team, and John Donaldson was on that team, amongst others. So that was a pretty good team. But if I'm correct, I think Maple may have pitched in the major, either in American or National League. I can't remember if he went up, but he was a pretty good pitcher. I know there was the Barnes brothers who played for the All Nations, and the All Nations had these different nationalities. So you had black guys and white guys and Asians and Native Americans. They're all playing on the same team. But the Barnes brothers, I know Virgil Barnes, he ended up going up to the either American National League. Can't remember which one, but he was also a part of the All Nations at that period. If you go through Kansas, the Barnes brothers, I'm trying to think, it's up near Horton, Kansas. They have a section of the highway named after these two brothers who played in the American National League. How about that? So if you travel around Kansas, you see some interesting things. So anyway, that was the Barnes brothers who also played for the All Nations. So let's go to the next one. How about October 14th? We're going to stay in 1917. Rube Marquard is fined $100 by President Ebbets of the Brooklyn National League team for pitching an exhibition game against the Lincoln Giants in Manhattan. That's Manhattan, New York. Of course, Chief Myers of the Brooklyn Braves caught that game for Rube Marquard. Now, here's the interesting thing on this one. Casey Stengel was set to play, but he had heard that Ebbett was going to be fining players if they played in this exhibition game, so he did not show up, but he was scheduled to show up for that game. Casey Stengel is from Kansas City, went to Central High School here in Kansas City, and know his history very well. Casey Stengel. You know, when he first came up, his nickname was KC, like K period C period. Ended up being called Casey, and most people will know him as that, and for all the victories he won through the 1950s with the New York Yankees. Of course, didn't have as much success with the New York Mets in '62, but most people know about Casey. So anyway, that's the game. Marquard, Hall of Famer, and so these guys were facing these guys from the American National League often. And I explain this. I don't know if you're listening to most of my broadcasts, but I have a Macmillan encyclopedia, baseball one. We used to get the big fat book. And I would always write in the border whenever I would see one of these pitchers. It doesn't make a difference if he's a Hall of Famer. If he was a pitcher in the American National League, I would make a notation of when he played against maybe an African-American team or something like that. And that's how I compiled a lot of this information. This isn't something I just started working on yesterday. I've been working on this spreadsheet that I'm reading from for over 20 years, something like that. So, okay. So anyway, let's keep it going. How about October 14th, 1920? Andrew Rube Foster. Man, Rube Foster is all over this tonight, and his American Giants. American Giants and John W. Connor's Bacharach Giants of New York battled to a 2-2 tie at the Senators American League grounds in Washington, D.C. The game was a pitcher's battle between Cannonball, Dick Redding, and Doc Sykes. The game was called because of darkness when well, actually, how about this one? When the Bacharachs loaded the bases in the ninth inning, got the bases loaded, and they called the game. Man, that sounds awfully suspicious. I would have hated to be a gambler at that game. I'd probably be pretty disappointed. They called the game for darkness. It was probably had to be pretty dark when they started the inning, especially to get the bases loaded. They had to spend some time. So anyway, I did interview Doc Sykes. I knew him very well. Had the opportunity to interview with him on many occasions. We talked about a lot. We talked intimately about him testifying in the Scottsboro case, a landmark civil rights case where a number of black youth were almost hung. And he participated in that. Now, I'm not sure how he ended up participating in that, but he definitely did testify. And if you go online and dig into where you can see the testimony, you will see his name. Sykes, of course, ended up being a dentist, and he was a graduate of Howard University. So he was able to tell me about people like Shackelford, who played for Howard, and a few other guys. So very interesting interview that I had. And I think at the time he was living in Baltimore. So it's been a few years. Actually, it's been a bunch of years. Sykes has been passed away for a long time. So he's amongst the immortals now. And so anyway, that's Doc Sykes. Yeah. Okay, we got a couple more, actually. So we can go to October 14, 1926. Willie Foster shut out the Bacharach Giants of Atlantic City in Chicago to help the American Giants to the deciding game of the World Series with a 1-0 win. Foster defeated his opponent in spite of yielding 10 hits. So we've been talking about Rube Foster all night. How about we didn't get a chance to talk about his brother? Let me take a drink right quick. So we get a chance to talk about his brother, Willie Foster. Now, I didn't get a chance to actually interview Willie Foster, but I did interview their sister. So it would be Rube and Willie's sister. And of course, his daughter-in-law, Doris, was a real big supporter of mine. So went to her house, which was, she lived in an apartment where Rube lived for many years. And so I would go to Chicago and interview her, and got to know them both. And boy, that is a thrill when I think about it now, how close I was able to get to some of these people and have real conversation and then be able to share that information with you today. I remember one thing that I was trying to do back then. You know, Rube Foster ended up passing away in Kankakee, Illinois, in the mental hospital. And when I talked to his sister, they would go to visit him, and they would take Miss Foster there to, her name was Sarah. They would take Sarah there to visit Rube in Kankakee, which is not that far from Chicago. And so when I talked to Rube's sister, her husband was driving. Now, when I talked to her, her and her husband had gotten a divorce. He was living, I think, in St. Louis, if I'm correct. And so I called him. She gave me his number. I called him. And one of the things that I asked both of them, I said, what were the symptoms that Rube was showing? And the reason I wanted to know that is because I knew someday, if I could get enough information, maybe I'd run into a doctor who knew medical things, and he might be able to tell me what Rube Foster was suffering from. So, that's the reason I was asking those kind of questions. So that's history now. And so, you know, I become a part of that history, and I'm sharing that history with you today. So not too many people around got a chance to actually go to Rube, where the house where Rube lived. And it just so happened, I'm going to be speaking in Pittsburgh, Kansas, Thursday night. And I'm going to be recognizing George Sweat. And George Sweat was a member of that team. Actually, George Sweat and Rube Curry. Rube Curry played for the Kansas City Monarchs in 24. And actually, he played against the Kansas City Monarchs. He was with Hilldale in 24 and 25. And George Sweat was with the Monarchs in 24 and 25. And then the next year, Chicago gets to the World Series. Now, Kansas City were in the first two World Series against the Eastern League. So in 26 and 27, then you have the Chicago American Giants. Well, it just so happened Ruth Curry is now playing for Chicago American Giants, and so is George Sweat. And so they become the only two players to participate in those first four World Series, 1924 through 1927. So I'm going to be talking about him and Sweat. George Sweat, once again, he's on this team, and Willie Foster's pitching. George Sweat is playing his role. Interesting thing about George Sweat, I was doing some research on him. He was quite the football player as well. And in 1912, he was at Emporia State. It was a teacher's college, and he was playing football there. And there's a school in Wichita called Friends University, and they played. Emporia played Friends University, and they beat them 134 to nothing. Boy, just imagine that. I don't think I've ever seen that lopsided of a score in a football game in my life. I would have hated to be the guys on the Friends University. So anyway, both of those schools are still there. I don't know if anybody's ever written about that game, but I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. So anyway, that's George Sweat, a member of the Chicago American Giants, who won that 1926 World Series game that I'm talking about, that Willie Foster pitched. All right, then. So that kind of takes everything that I was going to talk about this day in Black baseball history. And then I always do a coming and going. So I don't have a going tonight. I did talk earlier on another broadcast about Oscar Charleston being born. So he's coming. Let's see. But how about this guy? I just saw him last week. Willie Mays Aiken is born in Seneca, South Carolina. And of course, Aiken played for the Kansas City Royals and California Angels. Ended up going down to Mexico. He really slugged the ball down there. I think he hit over 50 some odd home runs. And no team would bring him back to the American or National League. So, but he is around Kansas City now. And I've taken pictures with him before. I may put one up in this post here. But Willie Mays Aiken. So who do you think he was named after? Yeah, Willie Mays Aiken. He turned out to be a tremendous home run hitter. And so, but yeah, he's still around, and I interviewed him before. And also with Willie Foster, his grandson, Doug Foster, is also a good friend of mine, and he will appear in different cities related to the Negro Leagues. I do have a picture of him holding my most recent book, the 1910 Chicago Leland Giants. That's Doug Foster. So anyway, that kind of concludes what I have tonight. I'm going to get out here before 20 minutes. I just want to thank everybody for joining. And I do want to thank everyone. I just passed 200 subscribers, and my goal is to probably in November with 400 plus subscribers. So guys, if you like what I'm doing, go ahead, hit that bell and share this broadcast. Let people know what we're doing here. Talking a lot of baseball, talking a lot of history, and having a good time at it on top of it. So if you like this kind of, let me put it this way. If you like this kind of baseball information, and was Hank Bauer, the old coach for Baltimore and played with the Yankees Athletic, he used to always tell me or ask me, say, are you still collecting that baseball dope? Yeah, I'm still collecting it, Hank, and you just only knew I have never stopped for 40 something odd years. But anyway, that's what we have, and that's what we do here. And I do it as often as I can. Right now, I'm bringing it every night with something new. So this does it for tonight's edition. This is October 14th, 2025, and you just heard a series of things that happened on October 14th through the ages from 1906 to 1954, when Willie Mays Aiken was born. All right, guys, I'm going to go out here. It's a late broadcast, but hopefully you guys on the West Coast, you're catching it at a good time. You guys on the East Coast, you probably either you're up late or you're going to catch me in the morning. So I'll share it and make sure you get a chance to see it. So thank you, guys. Everybody, you have a nice evening, and I'll see you tomorrow with some more baseball facts. Have a good day.